All right. Welcome to our first ever Friday night paranormal chat here on the Paranormal Network. This is our first crick at the can, so please bear with me as we give this a shot. My name is Jason Hewlett. I am a paranormal investigator. I'm also the manager here at the Paranormal Network. I am, well, why would you want to listen to me talk about how to get into ghost hunting, for one thing? Well, I'll sort of fill you in a little bit. I am a journalist. I'm a broadcaster. I'm a podcaster. I have a degree in filmmaking and film studies. And like many people in this field, I've had a long running interest in the paranormal, basically stemming back to being a child. So that eventually led me to get into the field of paranormal investigation up here in Western Canada, interior British Columbia. I was like a lead investigator and a society director with the Vancouver Paranormal Society. And I currently have co-founded my own paranormal investigation team along with Peter Wren, who, if you've watched We Want to Believe here on the channel and Hunting the Haunted, he's the executive producer, co-creator, and lead investigator on We Want to Believe and co-host of Hunting the Haunted. So that's kind of my thing. I've been doing this for the better part of 13 years. No, 18 years. Geez, 2003 was my very first paranormal investigation. So I guess to talk about how to get into ghost hunting, it should sort of start from the beginning and to share a little bit of my experience, what led me to it, because there's definitely a right way and a wrong way to hunt ghosts. Or actually, if you're in the field of ghost hunting, you actually rarely, if ever, call it ghost hunting. You're a paranormal investigator. That's the serious term. Because let's be realistic here, this is a pseudoscience at best. So I got into it as a child. I had two experiences, basically. One, when I was about 5 or 6, I was in the back of my mom's car. We were parked out in front of a friend's house because I was having someone over for a sleepover. She had gone up to the house, left me in the vehicle to get my friend. I was looking out the back hatchback, and a face appeared in the middle of the glass, floating, and it was horrible and it was deformed. There was no one on the street. I didn't hear anyone approaching, and it scared the crap out of me. When my friend sort of came, he swore it wasn't him. My mother, who was a teacher, dismissed it as my vivid imagination, but it definitely opened up an interest for me in this subject matter. And from there, I kind of started to realize, that creepy feeling at night when you think you're alone in a room, but you maybe not. And I'd start watching shows like, In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. Yeah, I'm that old. And other shows like Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. Then when I was about 13, I was out at a cabin here in the interior of British Columbia. That's where I live. We're in Bigfoot country where I am. And a buddy of mine and I were out in the woods. And we had kind of come down, and there's always a trail into the woods and a trail back to the cabin. Same one. It's the only way you can kind of go in and out. And we've done it all day. We were coming by, noticed the trees were all typical pine needles on the ground. Went, had dinner, decided to go back out for one final escape into the woods. And as we were going back up that very same trail beneath one of the trees, all the pine needles had been cleared away. There was a lean-to built and dug out into the ground. There was a fire pit created, and there was a bone inside of it. And this is all within like about an hour. The needles have been cleared and all this had been constructed. And my buddy Mike and I were totally floored by this. It was getting dark. We were freaked out. We decided to go back to the cabin because we didn't want to be out there and see whatever it was had built this lean-to. But that site was the talk of the night. We couldn't sleep. So first thing the next morning, we got our clothes on. We ran back up to that tree. None of that was there. In fact, the ground was completely covered with pine needles again. And from that point on, I was totally, totally hooked. Hello, everybody, by the way, those who are here. Thank you for coming and joining me. Alexander, Lloyd, Ayal, Steve. So from there, I was fascinated. And every chance I got, I read a book on the paranormal. I watched any show I could find. I watched documentaries. I started doing things like playing around with Ouija boards. And I was really into it for a number of years and then I went back to journalism school. And this is kind of when I went out on my first investigation. I had a magazine class, and I decided we had a whole semester to write a magazine article, one. And I thought it'd be cool to write an article for the Fortean Times. So I decided that I was going to write an article on the paranormal because I could finally engage my interest in some serious way. So where I live, there is a place called Tronquil Sanitarium. It's a former tuberculosis clinic and a mental hospital. They had been closed down in the 80s when they deinstitutionalized these facilities, as they did all over North America. I knew the caretaker. I'd heard the place was haunted, and I figured that is a great opportunity to go and actually do a serious investigation. So I was able to compile a team. I found a psychic. I had a skeptic in my class. I found someone who had had an experience at the location, seeing some spooky thing there. And a buddy of mine was in TV journalism, so he was able to get audio equipment and cameras. And we went out, and I was able to convince the caretaker that we could spend a night there. And I did an investigation. And I'm telling you this because this is the worst way to get into ghost hunting or being a paranormal investigator. You're in a old abandoned facility that's in disrepair. It's dangerous. No one had been in there for years, and it's a really easy way to get hurt. Fortunately, I had the caretaker who could point us in the right direction. So we spent the night there looking for ghosts, exploring the tunnel system underneath, having some really cool experiences, but not really finding much of anything, which is quite often the case. And Alexander, you live in a haunted house built in 1894. Have you had anything happen there that you can sort of share? I think that's kind of interesting. I've been to my fair share of haunted houses too doing this. So that was kind of my first real investigation. And I did a number of solo investigations after that on my own, not knowing what I was doing, going to old abandoned locations. Fortunately, not hurting myself, but I had no clue what I was doing. And I think from an investigative standpoint, I was just kind of muddying my way through. I had a bit of a journalism background, so I could ask questions of people, but I didn't have any equipment. I didn't know what kind of equipment to use. And I didn't know that, there are some precautions as an investigator that you kind of should try and do when you're going into these places. So that's what not to do. I got off lucky except for one very unfortunate Ouija board experience, which there's no point in talking about right now. The right way to kind of become a ghost hunter, if that's what you want to do, or you have any kind of interest in ghost hunting, is to find a team of investigators, which I eventually did in 2017. So I kind of investigated on my own for 14 years, not knowing what I was doing, seeing some interesting places, having some weird stuff happen, having things potentially follow me home, if you believe that kind of thing, and hearing growling in my house when there shouldn't have been growling in my house. But I didn't really get into the know until I ran into other people who are paranormal investigators and who had been doing it for a while. And Peter Wren was one of those people. And if we decided to do another one of these, I wouldn't mind bringing him on to share some of his insights. But you kind of need to know what you're doing, and you kind of need to know the right places to go. So if you can find a team of people who do this, there's a value to that because you can learn from them, you can ask questions, you can watch what they do. So quite often when you're part of a group, you get invited to go to places like houses, like haunted houses, like the one Alexander's sort of talking about right there, from homeowners who kind of want to know more about what's going on in their house. And you've got other people with you to rely on. Teams I've belonged to, we've had people in mental health, engineers, scientists, law enforcement officers, journalists like myself. So you've got a whole cross-platform of information to draw from and experiences to draw from. And you don't have to go looking so much. So I've investigated residential homes. I've investigated commercial properties. I've investigated heritage houses. And sorry, I'm just trying to keep up with some of the comments as well, but I'll kind of tell my story and then backtrack on that. So you kind of get into these, you've got access to not only information, but to these locations of people who actually want you to be there, that are more or less safe locations. And it's a neat hobby in that sense because you're being invited into people's homes who are having experiences. So, and how we typically kind of work an investigation is we go and first we interview the homeowners or the business owners to find out what's going on. And we ask a whole battery of questions to make sure that there maybe is something paranormal there. Because the one thing I've learned in my 18 years of doing this, and Peter, who's been doing this for almost 30 years, can attest to, is that quite often there's a logical, rational, mundane explanation. Houses settling, pipes banging, carbon monoxide leaks, even EMF, can all make people think that there's haunted stuff happening in their house or in their business. So we kind of try to rule everything else out first. And that's the right way to be an investigator, because you shouldn't just go in expecting everything is haunted. Most of the time it's not. But when you do get past these questions, and you also, make sure that the people aren't doing drugs, hallucinating or anything like that, or there's no mental health issues going on. You go in and you conduct a proper investigation using the right tools for the job. And the tools, basically, they're kind of the fun part of the trade. There's a whole bunch that you can use. I mean, you can go to Ghost Stop online and get, like SLS cameras, REM pods, Boo Buddy, which is a ghost detecting interactive bear created by Paul Bradford, who's a very nice gentleman, by the way. But the primary tools that you use as a paranormal investigator actually is just simply a digital recorder with some headphones, a flashlight, and a camera, be it a video camera, still camera, both. And those work just as well as your own kind of senses. Your sight, your eyes, your ears, your feel, your body will respond to these things when something will happen, or as some of the comments are saying here, they can feel a bed moving when there shouldn't have been, or even those cold spots, which I felt many, many different cold spots in my day. And that is quite often, if you're lucky, a sign that there's a spirit there. I even just had one just the other weekend at a theater that we investigated. Most profound cold spot I'd ever felt. So those are the tools you want to use. You can use the other equipment, like the SLS camera, but it's created for video game technology, and it likes to make sense out of things that don't make sense. So it can kind of make these stick figures. You've probably seen them on TV. They're used a lot in ghost hunting shows. They can put dust and other particles together to make it look like a figure when they're not there. So, and I didn't know any of this when I was doing it on my own. I was just running around in the dark, tripping over, old furniture, etc. But with a team, you kind of learn the proper way to approach an investigation in terms of the right questions to ask, what you want to look at it in a location before you go in, and then the right tools and equipment to bring with you. So with the group that I belong, we look for certain things in members. One thing is enthusiasm. You got to be enthusiastic about this. You got to be interested in the paranormal. And I can tell from the people here and some of the comments that people are quite enthusiastic about it, which I think is fantastic. And you got to be skeptical. And I know that's something that a lot of people doing this don't like to think that you have to be, but you do. You can't think that everything you're experiencing when you go into a place is paranormal, or that just because a place has a reputation for being haunted, that it is. We've been to several places which are supposed to have this reputation as being really haunted, and people are saying all sorts of, they go in and all this activity happens and blah, blah, blah. But 9 times out of 10, when you go into these places, nothing happens the whole night you're there. You're there all night. You've got like laser grids set up. You've got motion detectors set up. You've gone into several different rooms. Hey, Taylor James Johnson here is in the comments, and he is the writer, editor, and narrator of That Bigfoot Show here on the channel. And if you haven't seen that yet, that's a great way to go. That's a great show to watch. You got to watch it. And he's super interested he's a cryptozoologist, actually, which is awesome and very similar to ghost hunting. Vaughn actually is asking a question before I ramble on. What's a good way to find others to put a group together? I'm in a small town that needs a good investigation group, and there isn't one here right now. Well, Vaughn, that's actually something I'm kind of mentioning. You want to kind of look for, the way I joined my first group is I did a Google search of paranormal groups in the area, and they were actually doing a membership drive, which is pretty easy. Another good way to go about it is join groups like here on Facebook. There's various paranormal groups, cryptozoology groups, and find sort of like-minded people who are interested in it and equally as enthusiastic about it. Even like, group chats on a community page in whatever community that you're in, put an ad out in the newspaper even. You just got to watch out for people that weirdos, because there are those in this field. Yeah, and that's sort of how, that's a good way to kind of get started and put a group together. With that group, like I said, you kind of want to be skeptical. So even though you want to believe the paranormal's there, and I do believe in the paranormal, and I do believe there's ghosts, you want to go into a place that's supposed to be haunted, or people are telling you're haunted, but not think that it's haunted, if that makes sense. So the first time you hear a funny noise or see a shape or shadow, don't just assume that it's a ghost. Prime example that I'll give, because that's an easy way to do this. I was at a location called Bailey House, which is an old haunted location in the interior here. We'd been there several times. We'd had several experiences happen. I was sworn at by something I couldn't see. I had a toy hammer come flying off a shelf at me. We had doors closing on their own and people seeing specters, in windows, etc. But Peter and I were in this one room, and we heard literally the Scooby-Doo style moan coming through. And that, we almost crapped ourselves. We stopped. We heard it once. We did playback on our digital recorders to confirm that, yeah, that was picked up on the digital recorder. Then it happened again, and it was like almost like right between us. And we were just hair, back and neck, standing up, just almost freaking out here. But then it happened again and again and again. And so we started looking around the room to see what could possibly be causing this kind of thing to happen. And there was a hairline crack in the window, and it was windy outside, and that was causing the moan to come through the window. It wasn't blowing far enough to create disturbances or cold spots in any other parts of the room, but just enough there to create this moan. So even though that same night we had stuff happen that we couldn't explain away, we could explain this away. And that's what I'm talking about, a healthy level of skepticism. That's what you want to bring to everything, and not get caught in the trap that you have one spooky thing happen early in the evening or at some point in the evening that you can't explain, and then thinking that everything that happens after that is the same. Take each individual experience as its own story, for lack of a better word, and kind of look at that in individual components, and then go back later after the investigation and take a good day off or so, and go back and watch your footage and listen to your EVPs, because you're going to collect those. Those are, by the way, electronic voice phenomenon, and that's when you catch voices that you couldn't hear, either by using a spirit box or just by listening and asking questions of a room. So that's with the skepticism. And that, just, I'm glad I mentioned that because it reminded me. The spirit box, what is that? Because when you do EVP sessions, you sit down in a room, you're as quiet as humanly possible. This is the basic form of investigating that you do. It's not sexy. It can be boring. But you sit and you ask questions, and you don't ask just, questions that could get a yes or no answer. You do your research before going there. You find out as much as you can about the location, and you start asking certain questions about it, hoping to get an intelligent response. Names of people that have, say, died there, used to own the place. How they may have died, if there's a record of that in any way. And you kind of, when you're asking these questions, you take gaps in between each question long enough for something to potentially answer. And then you go back and you listen to that. Those are your EVPs. And we kind of do an EVP session like that, very quiet first. But then we'll break out what's called a spirit box. And it's an AM, FM receiver more than anything else. It cycles through radio channels very quickly. And it kind of makes like a tut-tut-tut-tut-tut-tut-tut-tut sound, like almost like a helicopter. And you ask these questions, and the whole theory behind this is that for some reason, because there's a strong belief that spirits kind of exist within the Earth's electromagnetic field, that they can communicate that way by doing that. And so you ask your similar questions that you would ask with the EVP session, but if the jutting stops and you get an intelligence response, like say in the case of Bailey House, a previous owner's name was Tom, and you asked the spirit to identify itself, we got a voice saying, "I am Tom." And all the static stopped. It was clear as a bell. You could hear it. And that's when you kind of give these a bit of validity, or as much validity as you can expect doing this field. Because let's be realistic here. It's a pseudoscience right now at best, unfortunately. So that's kind of a basic way that you conduct an investigation, as well as setting up your cameras throughout a place. We use motion detector cameras aimed at rooms, because you can't be everywhere at once. We'll set up even video cameras to record. The REM pods will put we investigated a place where there's hauntings on a staircase, and so we set up the REM pods, and a REM pod picks up motion. It's basically a motion detector on the stairs, and we also set up these balls to see if either the REM pod would go off or B, a ball would roll down on its own. You, you met, sorry, Ivania, you've met my dolls. I'm very skeptical until the point they showed up in my apartment. If you could put more about that in the comment, I'd really like to hear about that. Actually, I've had experiences with ghost dolls, and they're pretty creepy. Um, so those are kind of some basic points there. But like I said, you don't need the super fancy stuff. Your cameras, a spirit box, a digital recorder, and headphones and a flashlight's enough. I talked about staying skeptical. That's very, very important in this line of work. And even when you listen to your EVPs, your voice is, your kind of mind will try to fill in the gap and make these EVPs make sense. So if you can, or you know someone, I'm fortunate. I know someone, one of my closest friend, really is really good with music and sound. So he'll run the EVPs through, and we've been able to debunk even the EVPs, which sounded like a voice identifying itself as someone or answering a question, as just like electronic pings and house noises and things like that. So, and I guess patience is a big thing if you want to be in paranormal investigation, because rarely do you get anything. It's not like on TV where every house you go into that's supposed to be haunted is haunted, or every place. And even then, when you go to these haunted places, you're not always going to find something. And you're 9 times out of 10, you're not. So, the one time out of 10, you are going to have some luck, and it's super exciting, and it kind of becomes very rewarding in the sense that you want to keep going back. It fuels that desire to do that. Risks is another one. Wandering around old abandoned properties when you're not invited, the risk is you could be arrested for trespassing. You could fall through a floor, and it's your own damn fault for doing that. You can get hurt. You can be chased away by people, and yeah, so don't do it. Other legitimate risks. Well, going into a legitimate haunted location. Well, I've been pulled into a door by something I couldn't see down in a tunnel system at that same sanitarium when there was no air movement at all and no one on the other side of the door. And I'd just been through it a moment ago and was turning around to go back, and something pulled me into it. I'm 6'1", at the time, weighed about 190, and it pulled me off my feet, and I slammed the door. So rare occasions, ghosts, spirits, demons, whatever you want to call them, although I don't completely believe in demons, can interact with you. It's rare, but it can happen. There is also a potential that things can follow you home, although that's so very rare. I think I've maybe had that happen once. So you do want to take precautions. And when we go into a place, we always start off the same way. We say, we are here just to investigate. We mean you no harm, and we wish no harm to come unto us. That's usually a pretty good way to guarantee something won't happen. When we leave, we say, okay, we're leaving. We thank whatever's there, and we also say you are not welcome to follow us home. The odd time that it does happen, you can just ask it to leave, and it will generally leave. And that's a good way to go about it. So that's really, the nuts and bolts of becoming, a paranormal investigator. I see we got someone here from Central Michigan Paranormal Investigations. Welcome. And you say you started out with a cassette recorder and a Polaroid camera. You know what? And sometimes that's enough. A lot of people do reel-to-reel tape. Is also something we started with. I think that's great, and it's old school, analog way to catch it. Good for you. What do you guys use now, if I may ask, and if you want to mention that in the comments? And Alexander, you use the Alfred app to use old phones and tablets to catch what's going on in the house. Does that use like infrared or infrared or different spectrums of light? That's something we're playing around with a lot now, Peter and I and our team, is different light spectrums. We have a UV cannon we've broken out because, in theory, you can see spirits moving about using different light spectrums, be it on a camera or a video camera or a still camera kind of thing. I'm going to go through some of the comments here that I may have missed. Hello, Robin. Then you live in a haunted house built in 1894. Do you know the history of it as well? I'd be really curious to see the history of that. Danny, you live in a haunted house built 50 years ago. What sort of activity have you? Okay, oh, you got it right there. LED lights flickering for hours while we were away for days. Caught on security camera for this very reason. About 200 flickers an hour for a few days. No flickers before we left or after. If they can, bedroom lights. I had in the house I grew up with. And my father passed away when I was 19. Actually, today is the 30th anniversary of his death. And he built that house. He worked in it. He put a lot of love into it. And after he passed away, he had a workshop downstairs and people thought they would feel things downstairs in it, like they were being watched. I remember waking up in the middle of the night hearing, footsteps go from, his old master bedroom down the hall. And I got up and flicked the lights on in time to see the silhouette of something going around a corner to the basement, which is where he worked. And then one time when I was hanging out with a friend of mine in the house, we were talking about, him passing away and if I thought he might be sticking around or if there were any, thought the place was haunted. All the lights in the house went out at the exact same time. Not on the street. All the street lights were on. Other lights at other houses were on, but our lights went out. Dad used to be a practical joker. And I remember saying to him, "Not now, Dad." And all the lights came back on all at once simultaneously, which I thought that was probably one of the most profound experiences. And I had someone else there because most personal experiences, you're just on your own. So to have someone else there experience that, I thought was pretty cool. Central Michigan Paranormal, we use everything, but from time to time we go back to old school with the cassettes and the Polaroids. Amen to that. Yeah, we play around with different things, laser grids, etc. But it's a tried and true that you get the best results on. Definitely. And Alexander, you have a theory about how to catch a spirit. It's a work in progress. I'd love to hear it, because that could be really something. And that could be something to, catch one. Science could pay attention. I think that would be super cool. Anyway, guys, if anyone's got any more questions, I'd love to answer them. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap up here pretty quick. This is just sort of a test run. Let us know if you'd like us to do this again. I could even bring other people from the channel on to chat with me. So it's not just me rambling for, the sum total of 30 minutes, but I've really enjoyed this. I hope it's super insightful or at least help some people. I know I wish I had someone to offer some advice when I got started at this all those many years ago. But, if I can pass anything on to people, I would love to. Oh, Dinah, property driveway gate opens and closes on its own. Scary. TVs come on and opera is playing. One of the men who died in the house loved opera. Lights on and off. That's interesting. That's interesting. And that's definitely the kind of standard stuff that we get or hear about when we go into places. Rarely is it like on The Conjuring where crosses are turning upside down. In fact, that's generally not anything that happens. It's mostly pretty basic stuff, but I love that the guy who lived there used to love opera and that he's still listening to opera in his house. That's super cool. And Lloyd, yeah, definitely. We will do more. Absolutely, brother. So Vaughn, you say you lived in an apartment that had every kind of activity possible. Shadow figures, orbs seen with the naked eye, full apparitions, things disappeared, found in strange places, footsteps, etc. Another... So I got nothing. Yeah, quite often you do get nothing, unfortunately. Found one of the dolls sitting in the hallway. Wow. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep up with this. This is pretty cool stuff. And Donna, yeah, don't worry. We will definitely do more. Definitely. Yvonne, that sounds really interesting. 3 a.m. There's a lot of skepticism in the field about 3 a.m. being anything sort of meaning anything. I know from a religious standpoint, and there's something to bring up. There's kind of two trains of thought on this in terms of sort of the more scientific approach. And there's definitely people, like Sean Austin and Ralph Sarchi, both of whom I have a lot of respect for and have spoken with, where they definitely bring a lot of the religious element with them. And which I think is fine. I don't. I have a very big spiritual background. I try to leave that aside because I think of it as a kind of a bias. But I know I'm in the minority with people on that, because if you're religious, you're religious, and if you're not, you're not. So I kind of think, personally, I think you should still keep that bit of skepticism going. But I'm not going to argue with someone who looks at it from a religious standpoint, and definitely has God and Satan in mind when they look at all this activity. I don't believe all paranormal activity is evil or malicious or malevolent. I don't think there's demons around every corner, because I haven't seen one or any examples of that. So that's sort of my little bit on the religious bit. Yvonne, you know Pete. Cool. I'll have to chat with him about that. What do I think of aports? Aports. I'm not quite sure what the terminology would be on that one, Dinah. Could you kind of explain that for me? I know with orbs, I don't take orbs as being a sign of activity because most of the time it's just dust reflecting on some kind of light in the room. You'll have to forgive me for the aports, though. And Donna, when you moved into your house where you live, you heard footsteps upstairs. I finally went upstairs and just said, "You are safe here. I'll share with you." And I haven't heard anything since. And you know what, Donna? That's a really good way, too. If the spirit's not really bothering, most of the time they're not trying to bother you. They're trying to communicate with you, from my experience, which is fine. And if they're not bugging you and they're not scaring you and they're not keeping you up all hours a day and night, just say something like that and you can coexist. I've lived in houses where I've had activity and it's just there. It's not bothering me. It's never been malicious. So I don't care if it's hanging around. Alex, thank you. Got a jet. I'm actually probably going to wrap this up too now, folks. I thank everybody who came in and joined me this evening. Oh, hang on, spoon from Dinah. Things appearing, suddenly materializing. Also, I smell cigarette smoke. I've definitely smelled cigar smoke and other odors in a place when it wasn't there, and then it just sort of appeared. I was in an old manor where someone was supposed to smoke cigars. It had been open to the public all day. No one was smoking because it was a non-smoking building. Nothing stunk when we went in of cigar smoke, but later on in the evening, it smelled as if someone had freshly smelled cigars. And things suddenly materializing. I haven't seen things materialize personally myself, but I've heard of people, and I can't discount that either. So definitely, I think I support the aport theory there on that one. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for joining me this Friday night. I will definitely come back and do it again. Tell your friends, of course, about the Paranormal Network to come here, join the Facebook group. Go to our YouTube channel, like and subscribe, watch our videos, please. We're an independent operation. We truly appreciate all of your support. Thank you very much. Have a great Friday night and stay spooky.